Estamos ao vivo no YouTube, então, professor Rui, quando quiser, pode começar o painel.
Good evening for all. Without further delay, let's continue this BRICS Conference 2020. I'm here with various speakers, and now I will introduce the speakers of this fourth panel. I remind participants that it's possible to send questions, but if they are not answering due to time, all questions will be forwarded to the speakers for later reply. Well, the first speaker is Professor José Augusto Fontoura Costa. He is a doctor and professor at USP with extensive academic experience and expertise in legal areas related to international business and investment. Good evening, Professor José. Hello. Your microphone.
Hello, yes, good evening, Bui Badaro. It's a pleasure to meet you in this conference, and I am very proud to be in the same panel along with Sang-Chin, Maria Cholokova, and Emilio Mendonca Dias da Silva. It's a pleasure to talk with you. I will try to address some issues in a very short fashion, since I'm more interested in hearing the presentations of the other colleagues. I would like to think a little bit about the meaning of BRICS in after the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, what happens now when probably in a handful of months we will have a way to get out from the pandemics and try to reshape and reestablish some economic underpinnings. So I would like to start with an interesting data. Among countries facing the crisis, the only one among the 20 highest GDPs in the world, China is the only one who will experience some increase in GDP. It's not as high as it would be expected without the crisis, but it's still a higher GDP than before the crisis. And among the 20 highest GDPs in the world, the country that will experience the proportionally highest decrease is Brazil. It's expected that the Brazilian GDP falls from about 1.8 trillions to 1.3 trillions. It's a big fall considering our data. So it's somehow complicated. Brazil now is the 90th biggest economy in the world, and it will be among the 12. It will hold the 12th position next year. So it's a very complicated moment to Brazil. Nevertheless, the other BRICS, especially China, but also Russia, India, and even South Africa are doing better than Brazil, and they will experience some growth. On the other hand, it's difficult to observe a political strengthening of the ties among our countries. There are some difficult political and geopolitical issues that are taking place. For instance, India now is pushing out some Chinese tech firms and tech products because of the conflicts in the frontier region and some military clashes in earlier this year. And Brazil, the present Brazilian government experiences a very immediate alignment with the United States that doesn't fit the idea of a separate bloc of big and developing countries to try to find a way out from the crisis. For instance, this week, the discussion of the 5G um, mobile phones network was risen up in Brazil because of the the position of United States to force Brazil to rule Huawei out of the offer of 5G equipments that would be that would have a high cost in time and in the price of equipment to Brazil. So uh, this economic and geopolitical picture defies the legal possibilities of further and deeper cooperation. Uh, there is no stronger international treaties or organizations that could be put in place to strengthen the cooperation among the countries, and it is still a matter of unilateral politics from China, Russia, India, Brazil, and it's difficult to think in a bright future for the BRICS nowadays. Maybe in next year, and it's very possible, it's very likely that Joe Biden is the winner of the next American election. That would be very, very surprising if Trump turns the table again. It's very unlikely that it will happen. I will not discuss it now, but people who accompanies the political polls and the comments knows that this time is really, really very difficult to to find a Trump victory. Uh, it will change a little the international scenario. Particularly, maybe the United States will try uh, to reestablish the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was an interesting and important measure of the United States to try to internationally stop the Chinese advance and to involve other countries from Asia and try to counterbalance the new economics and economies of Asia. It includes both China, India, and also in a certain extension, India. It's interesting to think a little in the TPP context because Brazil is completely out of this arrangement. And as a matter of fact, the Brazilian policies regarding international trade and international investments, international agreements on trade and investments, was a policy focused on the multilateral negotiations in WTO. And WTO doesn't work well anymore for many reasons, including the United States decision to boycott the establishment of an appellation body, an active appellation body. It's a complicated issue, but Brazil has no other important trade or investment agreement. Brazil tried to put all its chances and all its efforts in the multilateral system, and it failed. Maybe it could be interesting in 2000, 2002, 2004, but around 2010, it was clear that the policies of many other countries to establish bilateral or plurilateral agreements regarding trade, investment, and ways of control of environmental issues, working issues, health issues, was a clearer way to try to find paths to increase the participation in international trade and international investment. On the other hand, the Brazilian capacity to make investments abroad just disappeared in 5 or 6 years. Brazil was doing some interesting investments especially in Africa. It doesn't happen anymore. So Brazilian position in this scenario is very, very complicated. Maybe it would make some sense to Brazilian authorities and Brazilian states try to find ways to a closer cooperation with other BRIC countries. But as far as I know, it doesn't happen effectively. It reaches some degree in discourse, but as a matter of fact, it doesn't turns out in effective relations. So what will happen with BRICS and the structure next years? It's very difficult to forecast. By the way, I am not very, what to say, optimistic about it. I think that the Chinese or Russian leadership will not take place first because India would play against a leadership of these countries that made a very interesting common policies statement in some, I think a couple of months ago, as far as I remember. And Brazil is outside the area of interest, maybe for Chinese investments in land, energy, and some other commodities production, but not in the same geopolitical area. So Brazil looks like an outcast for a possible Chinese-Russian partnership to development and cooperation. Maybe Africa is closer, other Asian countries are closer, maybe even some Caucasus or Central Asia countries are closer to fund cooperation regarding Chinese and Russian policies than Brazil. So what could we do regarding the BRICS to make it beyond a nice way to say Brazil, India, China, and Russia? It's difficult to know. Maybe an open attitude to try to make some technology transfer agreements with China and Russia would be an interesting field to do it. Not only regarding agriculture and natural resources, but also the industrialization, the transformation sector in Brazil. But it depends a lot on governmental position and governmental policies. And unfortunately, we have a government that doesn't like to believe in a cooperation with other countries that would not be United States. It's sad to say, but it's the true about Brazil. So I hope that our country can change some policies to find ways to make more trade and more investments and more technology transfers with partners in BRICS. And I really believe that it would be a very good way to diversify international trade and investment paths to Brazil and find ways to make it a stronger, a bigger, a more independent and a more developed country. If it would be happen, and if it would be happen through international law, it's difficult to say. Particularly nowadays, it's not a very good moment to it. So I hope that after the pandemics and after the defeat of Donald Trump in American elections, some ways will be open again to cooperation. It's a hope. And I thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry, I don't know if I contribute in some way to this debate. Thank you, Roy, very much. Thank you, the other colleagues from the panel.
Thanks a lot, Professor José Fontoura. Thank you for bringing your thoughts on BRICS to us clearly and objectively. And well, without further delay, let's pass the word to Mr. Zhang Xing, who, wait a minute, to Mr. Zhang Xing. Mr. Zhang Xing is graduated from Beijing Foreign Studies University and Renmin University of China with Juris Master and Bachelor of English Literature. He also briefly worked with U.S. Chamber of Commerce and South Carolina Department of Commerce as summer intern in 2007. Mr. Zhang Xing is an experienced trade officer with a demonstrated history of working in the international trade and investment promotion area. He is skilled in international trade, public policy, international relations, and is fluent in Chinese and English. He started his career with the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade since 2003, when he led the organization's U.S. task force and conducted a series of bilateral trade and investment promotion events. He was then promoted to the position of Deputy Director and Director of General Affairs with CCPIC's International Relations Department. By then, he oversaw the organization's global network and provided day-to-day support to its 30 overseas representative offices. Mr. Zhang Xing, please start as you wish.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all the friends. Thank you, Rui, for the kind introduction. Actually, I agree with Jose for most of his points, and BRICS is really important platform for China and for BRICS countries. We believe BRICS has a proven history of leading the world economic growth, an important engine for the global trade and investment. BRICS countries have covered over 42% of the world population and created a 2.8 billion world market. One thing is interesting to point out is that the impact of the pandemic is not always great and not always negative among the BRICS countries, especially when we're talking about China and Brazil. China has already maintained the largest trading partner for Brazil in the past 11 consecutive years. Even with the impact of the pandemic, the bilateral trade has maintained growth in the first 8 months of this year. And interestingly, Brazil maintained a very good trade surplus against China. And the trade surplus with China has taken nearly 70% of the bilateral trade. So it's a good thing, especially when Jose talking about the impact on Brazil, about the loss of job, the drop of economic growth rate, and I know the ECLAC has released a report estimate that there's probably another lost 10 years to come for Brazil and for the Latin American countries, for the whole LATAM area. But there is some silver line in the sky, that is the trade with China. I mean, this is not just between Brazil and China. There are some good numbers between China and Chile, China and Argentina, and others. And that is a very good sign, which means when about China, usually people will say, okay, ASEAN. Exactly. When we're talking about the 2007-2008 world financial crisis, the whole Asian region has jumped very fast after the crisis because the strong demand from China and because of the very timely stimulus package released by the Chinese government. And talking about challenges, I think BRICS do have a lot of, even though the overall number looks very good, we find that the inter-BRICS bloc trade investment is not like right, which means China and Brazil is good, the number looks good. When we look at the number between China and India, China, Russia, South Africa, maybe not that good. And another interesting observation we made is that it seems like there is not a very comprehensive trade and investment arrangement that all countries have given political priorities to this mechanism. We don't have a free trade agreement. We don't have a BRICS investment protection agreement. We don't have like a tax evasion. That is actually critical to the business success for the companies in different countries. And I agree with Jose that with this pandemic, with all the geopolitical tensions, it is not practical to dream that there's a lot of things to happen and BRICS will become like another plankton 5 years to come. It is, we may have to wait to make more observation. But from my perspective, I do have 2 points to make. First is we still have to dream big. We need to have a big dream. Like we don't have a free trade agreement between BRICS, but we can actually have some policy discussions on this. You know, Brazil is actually working with Mercosur and Russia is with the Euro-Russian Economic Community. China is getting close to finishing the RCEP deal with ASEAN and plus Japan, Korea, which may become the largest free trade zone in the world. And we need actually to actively pursue economic zone, BRICS free trade agreement. It is not easy from different countries, different 5 BRICS countries are so diversified and politically, culturally, and economically different from each other. And we do have some core industry priorities to protect, and that is very natural, but that's not the excuse that we can use to do not move forward with some discussion. Like this is it may take like 5, 10, even 15 years to close the deal, but we have to talking about the deal before it happens. This is my first point. Second is that we have to have some diversified and practical arrangement. Before we realize the big dreams, we may have set up some easier target for us to complete. We can have more trade and investment facilitation is a critical enhancement. Clear and modern standards may be attained in terms of the regulation and sanitation and sanitation requirements with a focus on harmonization and reduced bureaucracy. We are facing challenges in terms of logistic cost and trade barriers. So infrastructure upgrade and deregulation is always important in each of the BRICS countries. And we can also talk about mutual recognition agreements on authorized economic operator programs. I noticed that last week, Brazil just signed a trade deal with the United States, and AEO is one of it. The basic idea is to facilitate trade and deregulation, and this is the case for the trade relations between Brazil and the United States, also the case among BRICS countries. Although within the geopolitical environment and climate, free trade agreements, when we're talking about AEO, it may be a practical arrangement which can increase trade, maybe not by 10, 20%, maybe by 2, 3, 5%. But with that, it may means millions of jobs in a single country, which is absolutely good. And again, Jose mentioned about the trade and also investment. China is actually invest a lot in the past 5-10 years in Brazil, and I believe the trend will continue to happen, although it may not happen that quickly, and all companies are very careful in making investment decisions, especially the pandemic is not over, and we're talking about the second wave. But I'm sure with the market potential there will be more investment from China to Brazil and investment to other BRICS countries. What is missing here is an investment protection agreement between the BRICS countries. And this is also what we can discuss. Another point is about the technology cooperation. Jose mentioned about 5G and other areas. And we believe that BRICS countries should work together to build partnership on the new industry revolution. We can promote connectivity in rural areas for digital inclusiveness. All the BRICS countries are very big, with a big population, and the urban area is okay, but there are also lots of rural areas that we need to work on and improve the digital connectivity. And we also need to promote market access and foster development of digital platforms. China is having generated extensive experience in developing e-commerce, and e-commerce has helped us improve the resilience during the pandemic. And it is the time that we can do the practical experience sharing, the best practices to share with the BRICS countries. And there is also investment opportunities. And I know that there are several Chinese companies that are eyeing on the opportunities in BRICS countries. And Alibaba has been working very closely with Russia. And now it's also time for Alibaba to have more cooperation with Brazil, South Africa, and India. Although there is some geopolitical tensions between the two countries, we still need to do business. We still need trade and investment, and we still need more jobs and to feed families. And that's the basics, right? Another thing is for BRICS is I want to say that meetings are never missing with academics, but what we need most is concrete steps and deliver more results. One of the success cases that we can talk about is NDB, the New Development Bank. The creation of the bank and its operation is actually very successful. The bank most recently faced pandemic. I believe people will remember BRICS by these examples. What we need is more and more cases like this. So I think that's my basic idea is we need big dreams like the free trade agreement and investment protection deals. And we also need smaller and tangible results like NDBs, like AEO recognition and others. Hopefully, we can move this mechanism forward and help with this, we can grow the economy and create more jobs. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your speech, Mr. Zanshin. It was a pleasure to hear you. on the relationship between all BRICS countries, especially Brazil and China, and about the trade and investment relations. Well, no further delay, let's pass the speech, initiate the speech about Maria Cholokova. Maria is a third-year law undergraduate student at St. Petersburg State University. She studied Chinese language and corporate finance at Shanghai International Studies University. Maria's major scientific interest lies in the field of foreign affairs and international law, including foreign direct investment (FDI) law. She currently is participating in the FDI moot court competition. Besides that, Maria serves as a paralegal at ARBI Legal, a firm that provides legal consulting services for fintech projects. The word is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well.
Well.
And as I know, I can demonstrate my screen to show the presentation, if I'm not mistaken. So I would do that. I think that would be nice. I know I cannot do this because the organizers turned off this function, but okay, I can do it without the presentation as well. It's not a problem. So thank you for having me here. I'm really glad to be here and present my speech about the Sino-Russian cooperation in the field of investments. As you understand, it's very important not to only talk about the BRICS countries in general, but also to study a very close cooperation between two exact companies, two or three. It's very important because Russia and China have a very long history of their relationships. And especially after the Chinese Republic was established in 1949, the Soviet Union played a major part in building a legal system of Chinese Republic, and it put big influence on it. Thus, our countries have been in a very long-term good relationships, and these good relationships has also mirrored in the field of investments. Talking about investments, in 2018, the stock of Chinese investments into Russia formed about 143 million US dollars, while the stock of Russian investments in China summed up to about 43 billions of US dollars. Of course, it depends on the fact that Chinese economy is stronger than the Russian one currently. But of course, it's because China now has its politics, as it's called, going out strategy. And the Chinese government aims to extend outflow investments from China to other countries so that it can help Chinese market and influence other countries and Chinese businessmen and investors as well. Thus, China is actively looking for new markets, new investment opportunities, and it can find them in Russia because we have a lot of natural resources and we welcome foreign investors in our country. For example, in 2014, Russian and Chinese government made an intergovernmental Russian-Chinese Commission for Investment Cooperation, and they concluded several projects regarding the future perspectives. And it's not the only one organization that is being established jointly by Russian and Chinese government, but I will come to this issue a little bit further. So firstly, I would like to speak about the legal framework of Sino-Russian investment cooperation, because we cannot imagine any investment cooperation without a formed legal basis. And a big part in Sino-Russian investment cooperation play sovereign investment funds. And sovereign investment funds can be defined as a state-owned capital whose purpose is a comprehensive development of society. And both China and Russia have such funds. In Russia, for example, the system of funds is created to finance certain areas of state activities and attract foreign investors. Sovereign funds in Russia are divided in two groups. First, funds created within the budget system of the Russian Federation, thus they have budget money. And second, budgets created outside the budget system as a property complex managed by the created legal entity. And one of the biggest sovereign funds in Russia is the Russian Direct Investment Fund. And it is being regulated by the federal law number 154 about the Russian Direct Investment Fund. And this fund intended for skill investors, and it regulates the flow of money from the Russian budget to these investors and provides opportunities for them and protect their rights. China also has its own sovereign investment fund, which is called Chinese Investment Corporation. However, unlike Russia, Chinese Investment Corporation is a state-owned company established according to the company law of the People's Republic of China. The Chinese Investment Corporation has its board of directors, the supervisory board, and the executive committee. And they also have 3 subsidiaries. It's ICIC International, CIC Capital, and Central Holding. So why I'm talking about this is that these funds, the Russian Sovereign Investment Fund and the Chinese Sovereign Investment Fund, in 2011, they established jointly Russia-China Investment Fund. And now this fund aims at making investments in both Russia and China. And this fund has invested in wood sector in Russia, in Didi. It's one of the largest taxi companies in China. And they have many ongoing, very successful projects. And thus it is very important when talking about investment cooperation between these 2 countries. And now talking about the laws and the legal basis. So any investment cooperation between 2 or more countries is being regulated under both national regulations and international laws and regulations. The interdependence of international and national legal regulation of foreign investment is based on the principles of correlation of international and domestic law, which on one hand are independent systems and on the other hand are closely connected with each other and mutually influence each other. National law reflects national investment policy, and it contributes to the establishment of investments by legal entities and individuals of the capital exporting state to the host state. In China, the single unified document on foreign investment law was published just on January 1 this year in 2020. Before that, they had many civil acts that were governing investments and investment law in China. However, now they have a unified document which provides very favorable conditions for foreign investors. And under Article 2 of this law, foreign investment is investment activity directly or indirectly carried out by foreign natural persons, enterprises, and other organizations. Needless to say that in China, investments are being regulated by negative lists and encourage catalog. Negative list stipulates and it established the list of prohibited areas for foreign investors, while encouraging catalog provides a list for spheres which are good for foreign investors to invest in and which are being supported by the Chinese government. So there are several lists, and when a foreign investor would like to invest in China, it has to check whether this or that sector or sphere of economics is located in one list or another. In Russian Federation, the federal law number 116 is governing the foreign investments in Russia. It is called the Law on Foreign Investment in the Russian Federation. And this legal act is aiming at raising and effectively using foreign material and financial resources in the economic of the Russian Federation. Under Article 2 of this law, foreign investment is the investment of foreign capital in an object of entrepreneurial activity on the territory of the Russian Federation. Foreign investors in Russia can be a national of another country, a stateless person, legal entity, or any organization belonging to another state. We also have a negative list for foreign investors, and it is established by the federal law on the procedure for making foreign investments in business companies of strategic importance for ensuring the defense of the country and state security. Thus, the negative spheres for foreign investors in Russian Federation are mainly connected to military sector, and other spheres are mostly encouraging for foreign investors to invest in China. Both countries, Russia and China, have their own tax incentive system for investments. For example, in Russia, there is the tax code of the Russian Federation, which establishes some tax incentives in the field of investments. Thus, foreign investors may pay less taxes than, for example, Russian businessmen. In China, such legal incentives are located in different legal acts. One of the acts where you can find such information is the Enterprise Income Tax Law of the Chinese Republic of China. And further tax incentives could be found in other legal texts of the Chinese Republic. Talking about the international level of Russia-China investment cooperation, we have several agreements on cooperation, economic cooperation, cooperation in the field of trade and investments. The first one was concluded in 1992, and this is the Agreement on Trade and Economic Relations, the government of the Russian Federation and the government of the People's Republic of China. Moreover, we have the Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation between the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation. We have a memorandum between the governments of two countries, but the most important act in our investment cooperation is Russia-China Bilateral Investment Treaty. In legal sources, it is called Agreement between the government of the Russian Federation and the government of People's Republic of China on the promotion and reciprocal protection of investments, which was concluded on November 9, 2006. This is the major document in Russia-China investment cooperation. Bilateral investment treaties as well as multilateral investment treaties is the major applicable law for any investment cooperation because it establishes terms and conditions for individuals and legal entities willing to make investments in another foreign country. This is a specialized act for Russia-China investment cooperation, and it of course provides FET standard, fair and equitable treatment for foreign investors. It protects foreign investors from possible expropriation by the host state. It ensures all the guarantees for foreign investors. Thus, it shall be considered when making any investments between two states. And now I'd like to address a few projects that are being currently concluded between Russia and China, because I think it is important to understand in which fields does the country cooperate. I think the major part of Sino-Russian investment cooperation is being made in the oil and gas sector. China is one of the biggest importers of oil and gas, and Russia offers such natural resources for foreign investors and foreign countries. And thus, China now is going to the Arctic because they want to make a new trade route. It is called, there are 3 routes actually in the Arctic that can be made, but the major one and the one where Russia is also participating is the Northern Sea route in the Arctic, which would be another trade route between these two countries. And there is a special federal law in Russia which was established on July 28, 2012. And it is stated that the Northern Sea route is a historic and national transportation line of the Russian Federation, open to foreign vessels, provided that they observe the navigation rules by Moscow for their Northern Sea route. And China implementing this strategy going to the Arctic. In 2018, they implemented and established a unified document, unified policy, which is called China's Arctic Policy. And in this document, you can find Chinese prospects and Chinese guarantees that they provide to foreign countries when going to the Arctic, and what they're going to do there, how they're going to do there. And thus it is very important for countries who have a special connection to the Arctic region to understand what are their intentions of China going and building this route. One of the biggest projects that was concluded just last year is LNG-2 project. It was concluded between Novatek, it's the second largest gas producer in Russia, and on the other side, there were two state-owned Chinese oil merger companies, namely China National Offshore Oil Corporation and China National Oil and Gas Development Corporation. Arctic is not the only sphere where two countries have investment cooperation. However, it's one of the major ones, and where most of the investment go from China to Russia. And to conclude my speech, I would like to address a few my thoughts on the possible perspective of Sino-Russian investment cooperation and how it will be in the next few years. So firstly, I would like to say that both China and Russia are member states of many important interstate organizations. For example, the BRICS Association, for example, Shanghai Organization, and many others. And China and Russia are implementing One Belt, One Road initiative, which also promotes bilateral investment cooperation. And thus, I think this would influence the possible cooperation because it provides a very favorable treatment of foreign investors in two states. Moreover, China is implementing the strategy of going out, and it increases its outward foreign direct investments, while Russia implements new laws and regulations which welcome these investments. Moreover, currently Russia is making, how it's called in the literature, a pivot to the east, and because we don't have very welcoming relationships with the West, and after the West implemented many sanctions against Russia, Russia is currently welcoming investments from other countries, from the East countries, and it would like to build long-term and friendly relationships with them, as well as the BRICS countries. And thus, I think that our possible and our future cooperation will be very friendly and long. And of course, as I already stated, we have a very developed legal system, a very developed ground system for investment cooperation between Russia and China, because both national and international level of laws is very developed, and it really provides a good protection for foreign investors. Thus, thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was interesting for you. And whether you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks a lot for your speech in this panel, especially about the relationship in Russia and China. It was very interesting. Well, now we will hear Professor Emilio Mendonca. Emilio Mendonca is a lawyer, a master in public international law from Faculty of Law of University of São Paulo. He is graduated in law from Faculty of Law of São Bernardo do Campo and in international relations from University Center Santo André Foundation. Founding member of Caraíve Group of International Relations and Public Policies, arbitrator of Brazilian Center of Economic Litigations, and member of BRICS USP since 2016. Emilio.
Thank you, Professor Rui. I would like to greet all the speakers. For me, it's a pleasure being here. I would like to congratulate all the organization, me included. I don't know if you're hearing me. Do you hear me? Me included, because I'm a part of the Center for BRICS Studies of University of São Paulo. And I would like also to thank all the sponsors for permitting us to realize this event. I believe that my speech will be almost an extension of what Maria has presented, because she has presented concerns, issues relating to investment relations between Russia and China. Now I think that I can extend to the other BRICS countries and speak some words in this matter. One first thing that I would like to say is that in the beginning of BRICS group, there were many questions of what would BRICS have in common if there was no historical or cultural ties. I believe that this question was made thinking about traditional integration, regional integration, because it was appointed that BRICS countries only had the condition of an emerging economy as similarity. I believe that nowadays we know that this economic condition is more than the question thought previously, because BRICS is resisting even though the changing is wording. So I believe that this is because this emerging economic condition has shown that we have more to discuss and perhaps more similarities than differences. So I will expose to you some research that I have been doing during the last years. I will talk about investment, two topics important for economic law. I will talk about investment and competition. First, so I will talk individually about each country. First, I will address South Africa. South Africa relation with investment protection comes from external environment. When apartheid regime has come to an end, UK has promoted a BIT with the country because the UK was fearing threats of expatriation. So this first BIT has inspired another BITs, treaties with European countries, and basically South Africa was ruling its investments relations by bilateral treaties. But the provision of this first generation of BITs, they were severe because it provided that the country, South Africa, couldn't have a margin for fomenting industrial policies, for example, national interests, and the great part of those provisions, they were contrary to South African constitution, as well as in the theme of compensation that South African constitution provided that there could be different degrees for compensation in case of expatriation, where these treaties prevented any kind of different degrees of, it depends on the national interest. So as it was considered too rigid, after some arbitration proceedings on investment, the country has decided to terminate this first generation of treaties and now started to rule investment relations by its domestic legislation. So in 2015, it came into force the Protection Investments Act. It promotes the protection for investments, but at the same time, it is clear in the sense that this protection will be promoted jointly through the promotion of national interests in some areas, local interests in some areas. Each covers just the enterprises constituted under South African law, because this is a way for controlling all these transactions. And of course, there is a second generation with different provisions, but nowadays the Protection Investment Act is perhaps the most important law of South Africa. On competition side, the country has had a previous law. It was named Regulation of Monopolistic Condition. It's dated from 1955. It is considered permissive. There was no important measure for avoiding monopolies or restriction of market, for example. And in the 1998, there was a new law named the Competition Act. Its number is 89. So this legislation I consider to be really very interesting because it's historically situated. It says that the concentration of economic power in the country has happened because of apartheid regimes and other discriminatory laws in South Africa. So this is a picture of South Africa that I would like to add. Now moving to Russia, I want to talk about Russia too much because we had Maria that certainly knows better than me about the Russian legislation. I would like just to say that in the case of Russia, as we could see, the policy directed to investments, foreign investments, is to conclude treaties, bilateral treaties. Its first bilateral treaty was concluded with Finland in 1989. There was a new law dated from 1991, but it was considered hostile to foreign investment interests. So there was a new law in 1999, and now, as it was said by Maria, this law, Russian law, permits that there are some exceptions to the protection of foreign investment, to the liberalization, and to non-discriminatory rule if it's made by a federal law as well. So there is a margin for Russia to foster some sectors, some economical sectors, by means of implementing an industrial policy. On competition side, the legislation, Russian legislation on competition is really one of the oldest of the world, and it comes from the Tsaristic regime. There was a code, criminal code, dated from 1845 that already addressed competition and violations of competition. During the period of Soviet Union, there was no necessity for that. And back to the context of 1990, there was a new wave for ruling competition. So it was established the State Committee on Support of New Economic Ventures. And in 2004, it was created the current agency responsible for leading with competition. It is the Federal Anti-Monopoly Services. And the current law is the Federal Law on Protection of Competition, as amended in 2016. There is a peculiarity in Russian system because forced labor punishment has been introduced to the system of the country. And it's interesting because violations to competition can be punished with withdrawal of salaries and can be punished with forced hard labor. Now, talking about India a bit, before this context in 1990, India had a protectionist past. foreign investments were permitted only in a certain percentual. It was really very limited. It could be increased for 40% in cases of the investment result some of what we call performance requirements. So if there was transference of technology, if there was an increase of exportation, then Indian legislation permitted in the past that this percentual could be increased. But the Gulf crisis and other movements has led India to reform their economy, and its legislation on that. And we've had in 1991 a document called the New Industrial Policy and Other Reforms. It started to change the policy direct to investments. India in this scenario started to conclude a lot of BITs. Usually the BITs are said to be the reason for Indian economic success. I don't know about that, but it's generally attributed to the treaties. Nowadays we have the Consolidated Circular of 2017, which was prepared by the Ministry of the Commerce and Industry. It permits foreign investments widely, but there is also a negative list. There is also a provision contained prohibited areas. These areas are like cigarettes, cigars, and atomic energy, and some activities inside railways. And so it's very interesting. In the side of competition, India has had one of the first legislation on this matter. Nowadays, it is ruled by the Competition Act. It's dated from 2002 and amended in 2007. It aims to curb cartelizing behavior, abuse of dominant position, and to control, to supervise the merger and acquisitions. And this law has created the Competition Commission of India, which for us it's an administrative body very similar to ours. It is responsible for approve and supervise, educate matters relating to competition. Okay, now moving to China. China had, as we know, opening movement after the decade of 1970. That's when China started to change its policy directed to foreign investment. It started to be somewhat permitted. It was not so open, but we can say that it was a progress in the senses that there was a legislation treating on foreign investments. As we know, until very recently, we had the catalog for the industrial guidance of foreign investments. Previously, we had 4 categories of foreign investments. It was divided into encouraged, in areas like manufacturers and agriculture, permitted, in permitted areas were those that was not treated by the law, restricted, then we had some limitation like the foreign investment should be all the enterprise where the foreign investments are in shall have the participation, major participation of nationals. So there were some limits like that, and prohibited some areas that is considered vital to national interests. And nowadays, as Maria mentioned, this system has changed, mostly because in China there was many people using measures, employing measures to defraud the system, and now the supervision is a little higher, and it was simplified. And now we have the negative list. Okay. Well, in the side of one thing that is very interesting about China is its BITs. I believe that China would have economic power to be different, but as many scholars are noting, Chinese BITs has a characteristic of south to south. So it covers the investment only if it's admitted, and the treats those south to south characteristics BITs, they subject the investment to domestic law. So it's an interesting characteristic. I believe that for the power that China has nowadays, it could be different, but China maintains this policy. About the competition in China, as we know, China is had in the state-owned enterprises very strong, expressive reference of their economies. So they were discussing a law to address competition since 1992. It took a long time for approving a legislation, and nowadays they have the anti-monopoly law of the People's Republic of China. It was concluded in 2007. But there are other important laws like merger and acquisitions. It is this specific law is made for checking competition issues related to foreign investments, and relating to the authority, the administrative authority. China is a bit different of the other countries because its authorities are diffuse. It depends on the matter, then it would be subject to one kind of authority, but the Ministry of Commerce and Industry is the most representative one. And then a few words about Brazil and in the matter that the protection of investments. I would say that most part of the provision interesting to investors, it would be constitutional. The constitutional says that every expropriation shall be reimbursed. We have also legislation establishing non-discriminatory rules. We have had in the side of international area, we have had an interesting situation because in 1990 decade, we have concluded a lot of BITs, but we changed our view on this kind of treats, and we haven't ratified. So now after Temer presidents, we started to conclude investments promotion and protection agreements, but until now, we refused to ratify because of the example of Argentina. And now we are perhaps we are going to conclude this kind of treats. In the competition side, we can say that the Constitution of 1930 was the first because it provided that states should make interventions in the economy. Nowadays, we have our Administrative Council for Economic Defense. It was created by a law dated from 1962. Previously, we didn't have the preventative function to be exercised by this administrative body, and nowadays we work in the preventive and repressive side. Okay, now I would like to make a reflection if we can have a joint vision on these matters. I like to mention that previously to BRICS grouping, Brazil and India has presented to WTO a document questioning the agreement, the investments trade related agreement, arguing that it was not proven that liberalizing or not having these sorts of measures, for example, requiring the transference of technology or having this performance requirements, it was not proved that this could foster competition. So they presented a joint vision where in fact these measures, the performance requirements, could improve competition. I believe that nowadays Brazil wouldn't have this position, as it said, and in the case of BRICS as a group, we have been doing some documents talking about investments, addressing investments. It basically declares the importance for all the BRICS countries of investments. I believe, for example, we have the Day Strategy for BRIC Economic Partnership, dated from 2015. I believe that we could do a little more. I think that we should start with a university. I think we should start to publish together, because I know that nowadays, and with pandemic, for example, in the beginning of pandemic, India has declared that he wouldn't permit acquisitions with opportunism. Perhaps with the pandemic, we have more protectionist measures, and I'm not sure if we can do the consensus or any treat relating to that, but I think that the scholars could exchange informations and we could be published together at least. So we can assure that if we don't have a consensus, a deep consensus on this matter, at least we have the discussion, right? And in the matter of competition, I believe that in this area cooperation is higher by initiative of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, which was a Russian initiative in 2015. It happens regular meetings each 2 years with all the big BRICS countries, and its administrative bodies responsible for competition. So I believe that it is. My speech is over. I don't know if I've spoken too much. I would like to thank I would like to thank you all, and for me it's a pleasure to be here again. Thank you.
Thanks, Emilio. You didn't speak too much. It was perfect. Thanks for your presentation. I think your presentation provided an overview of investments and competition in BRICS countries. Well, and now we'll wait the host for questions. We have no questions at this moment. Well, someone want to speak, make some comment about the presentations? Emilio, Maria, Professor José Fontoura, Mr. Zanchin. No further questions, no answers. Well, so I'm very grateful to the speakers of this panel for the relevant contribution brought about the theme. And now I close at this moment, but I invited all participants of this conference to participate tomorrow morning on the theme BRICS Prospect of Cooperation, with the presence of Professor Paulo Borba Casella, of the Ambassador of India, and the General Consul of South Africa, and the General Consul of China. Well, that's it. Thanks for all.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye-bye, Emilio, Professor Fontoura, Maria, Mr. Zanchin. Thanks for all, and see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, bye-bye.